Hello and welcome back to our channel. Today, I'll be working on a special project, creating a shaving set from walnut wood. To start, I'll be using a piece of walnut, a brush handle kit, and a 20mm Forstner bit to drill the opening for the shaving knot. Here, I start by using a 20mm Forstner bit to drill the first hole. Then I switch to a 7mm drill bit because the brush handle is made to fit that size. Once both holes are done, I take a moment to measure the base again, where the shaving brush will later be attached. To make sure the fit is perfect, I slightly enlarge the outer opening to 22mm. This way, the brush will sit very tightly and securely in the wood once it's glued in place. For this final adjustment of the opening, I'm using a skew chisel because it's perfect for this kind of work. I make sure to guide it at just under a 90-degree angle so the cut is clean and controlled. Fit is excellent, and I can move on to shaping the handle for the shaving brush. Here, I start right away with the skew chisel, using it first to square off the front of the wood. Once that's done, I keep working with the same tool to slowly shape the piece into a cylindrical form. This cylinder will serve as the base from which I'll later create the final shape of the shaving brush handle. When working with a skew chisel, it's very important to keep the tool steady and move it smoothly along the surface. The blade should always be held at a slight angle, never completely upright, and guided so it glides across the wood instead of digging in. It's also crucial to use the lower portion of the cutting edge, which gives a clean cut and prevents catches. With the right technique, the skew chisel produces a very smooth surface even before sanding. So here, I take my time and focus on a stable grip, correct angle, and proper edge control. Here, I start by using a caliper to measure the size for the upper part of the handle, which will later serve as the grip. Then, I mark the lower part of the handle and prepare it to be slightly narrower. At this stage, the handle doesn't have its final shape yet. I'm just measuring and preparing the base, making sure the dimensions are correct for the next steps. The measurements here are especially important because in the end, the handle needs to fit perfectly into the stand. Here I start with the 12mm spindle gouge, and I begin shaping the lower part of the handle first. I carefully remove the excess wood and start defining the basic lines of the form. As I cut, I make sure the tool moves smoothly and evenly along the surface of the wood. Once the lower part is roughly shaped, I move upward toward the top section of the handle, which will form the grip. The spindle gouge is perfect for this step because it allows me to create soft, rounded transitions, which are very important for a comfortable handle. I always take my time here and avoid taking off too much wood at once, because working in smaller steps gives me much better control over the final shape. At this stage, the handle doesn't yet have its final details, but you can already start to see the main proportions and the basic outline. This step is all about establishing the foundation, which I'll refine later on to make the handle well balanced and pleasant to use. Here I'm adding a small decorative detail to the handle. It's not just for looks. This little bee will also help the handle sit nicely in the stand, while giving the shape a touch of elegance. I start with the parting tool to mark out the base. Once that's done, I switch to a 12mm spindle gouge and carefully shape the final rounded form. I pay close attention to keep the transition soft and smooth so the handle looks like one continuous piece without any sharp breaks. Because this detail is small, I take my time here. I'd rather remove a little wood at a time and keep full control over the shape, since precision is what really makes a difference in parts like this. These small accents are what give the handle its character and make the finished piece feel truly handmade. And while I'm working on this part, I also want to say how important the connection with you, the viewers, is for us. For Petra and me, your comments, questions, and ideas mean a lot. They give us motivation and inspiration for new projects. So we'd really love to hear from you. What do you think of this shaving set, and what would you like to see us make in future videos? Please leave your thoughts down below in the comments. We're happy for every single one, and we'll do our best to reply to each and every comment. At this point, I remove the handle from the chuck and mount it onto a block of wood that I had prepared earlier. This step might look simple, but in reality, it's very important to do it with precision. The key here is that the block I'm attaching it to must be made so that the opening for the brush fits extremely tightly onto the wood. If the fit is even a little loose, the handle can shift during turning, and that will make it impossible to get a precise final shape. It also makes sanding much harder because the piece won't stay perfectly centered. So I always take extra time to make sure this joint is absolutely snug and solid. Once the handle is firmly in place, shaping the upper part of the handle becomes much easier. The handle stays perfectly centered, so I can take it to its final shape smoothly and without any vibration. Later on, this also makes sanding and applying the finish much simpler because the handle doesn't move or wobble. Some turners also use this same technique for the final finishing of the bottoms of bowls because it allows them to keep the piece securely mounted and perfectly centered until the very last detail is complete. So even though this step may look like a small detail, it's actually one of the most important ones. It ensures that the rest of the process will go smoothly, safely, and with the precision needed for a professional-looking result. Here I start with sanding the handle. For this step, I'm using sanding papers from Klingspor, which are excellent for this kind of work. They're flexible, but also durable, which means I can easily follow the shape and reach into all the smaller details of the handle. Because the surface was shaped cleanly with chisels and without any tear out, I can skip the coarse grits and begin directly with 240 grit paper. This is enough to remove the fine tool marks and prepare the wood for the next stages. Once I've sanded the whole handle with 240 grit, I then dampen the surface with water. This raises the tiny wood fibers, which I can then sand off. Doing this ensures that the surface will remain smooth even later, when the handle comes into contact with water during use. From there, I continue sanding up to a final grit of 400, which leaves me with a beautifully smooth surface, ready for finishing. At this stage, it really shows how important the quality of the sanding papers is. Klingspor makes the process faster and the end result much cleaner. But I'm not applying the finish just yet. Before that, I'll polish the handle with 2 homemade food-safe polishing pastes. This gives the wood an even finer surface and prepares it perfectly for the final protective coating, while keeping it completely safe for everyday use. With the handle now sanded and polished, it's time to apply the final finish. For this step, I'm using Propolitura, which is available from the company Samson Kamnik. Propolitura is a natural wood finish made from beeswax and propolis. It's completely food safe and skin safe, and it gives the wood excellent protection against moisture while leaving a warm, silky sheen. I especially like using it for items that are meant for everyday use because it's both safe and durable. As soon as I apply it, the walnut really comes to life. The natural grain patterns stand out beautifully, and the handle gains a rich depth and character. And with that, the handle for the shaving brush is finished. The only thing left is to glue the brush knot in place at the end. Now, we can turn our attention to the handle for the razor. The first step is to glue the copper tube into the piece of walnut wood. Once the glue has set, I mount the blank onto the mandrel with bushings on each side so that I can start shaping the razor handle. For this part, I'm using the same tools as before, mainly the spindle gouge and the skew chisel. These give me the control I need to achieve both clean cuts and a refined final surface. I begin by turning the walnut blank down to a smooth cylinder, making sure it's even along its entire length. The copper tube that I glued in earlier is now firmly in place, and the bushings on the mandrel give me a clear guide for the final dimensions. The goal is to bring the wood down flush with the bushings so that the metal parts of the kit will fit perfectly once everything is assembled. Once I have a clean cylinder, I start shaping the actual form of the handle. I want it to be elegant, but also very comfortable to hold. So I create gentle curves, slightly wider through the middle and tapering toward the ends. The spindle gouge is ideal here because it allows me to shape these flowing lines naturally. In the design, I also add a decorative feature in the center and near each end of the handle. These accents give the razor a unique look, but they also provide a tactile reference point so you always know exactly where to grip the handle. It's a small detail, but one that makes the handle feel more intuitive and balanced in the hand. From time to time, I refine the surface by using the spindle gouge, almost like a skew chisel. I do this by working with just the left or right edge of the cutting tip, tilting it slightly to the side. This technique allows me to take very fine, controlled cuts, leaving the surface of the wood extremely smooth straight off the tool. Because of that, there's much less sanding needed later on. It takes some focus and a steady hand, but the results are well worth the effort. As I shape, I constantly check the diameter against the bushings, making sure not to cut too deep. The alignment between the wood and the metal fittings has to be exact. That's what gives the finished razor a professional look and a solid, reliable feel. Walnut is a joy to turn. The shavings come off cleanly, and with every pass, the grain of the wood becomes more visible. This part of the process is also one of the most enjoyable for me. The handle slowly takes shape, and I can make small refinements, adjusting a curve, softening a transition, until everything feels just right. Each piece of walnut is unique, and I like to let the grain and the proportions guide me, so no two handles ever turn out exactly the same. And while I'm shaping this piece, I'd like to ask you, what kind of razor handle do you prefer? Do you like a slimmer, modern design, or a more classic style with stronger curves and decorative details? Let me know in the comments. Petra and I love reading your ideas, and they often inspire new designs for future projects. I apply 2 polishing pastes to the handle. Both are completely food safe. One is slightly coarser to remove fine scratches, and the other is finer to bring the walnut to a silky smooth finish. These are homemade pastes that Petra and I are currently testing, and we plan to offer them soon on our online shop. They already give the wood a beautiful shine and a very smooth feel. I now apply the final protective finish, Propolitura. This natural product, made from beeswax and propolis, is completely safe for skin contact and provides great protection against moisture. It also gives the walnut a warm, silky sheen, really highlighting the natural grain of the wood. Now I start by assembling the razor handle. The walnut blank has been shaped, sanded, polished, and finished, and now it's ready for the hardware. I attach the metal fittings from the kit, which are designed to hold a Walnut Mach 3 razor head. Once everything is pressed together, the razor handle is complete, strong, balanced, and elegant. Next, I move on to the shaving brush. Here I glue the knot securely into the walnut handle. The opening was made to fit very tightly, so once the glue sets, the brush will stay firmly in place. I really like how the two pieces work together as a set. The walnut gives them warmth and character, while the copper tube and metal fittings add strength and contrast. It's a combination of natural materials and craftsmanship that creates something both useful and beautiful. If you'd like to have a set like this, you can find it on our online shop at pipejawood.com. We also have other wooden and resin creations there, so feel free to take a look. Before we wrap up, I want to thank you for watching this video. Your support means so much to Petra and me. Every comment, and every subscriber really helps us continue creating and sharing our projects. So, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and leave us a comment below. We're always happy to read what you think, and we do our best to reply to every single one. See you in the next video, and until then, happy wood turning.